Welcome in and welcome back. We are here for episode 1 of Ask Adrian Anything. Now, I was going to do a 150 subscriber special and ask me anything, but there were so many questions and so many good ones. I knew that I would not be able to do any of them, any type of justice, by trying to answer all of them in one video. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start this as a series here on the channel. So if you have any questions for Ask Adrian Anything, leave them in the comments section below. But we are here for episode 1, and the questions, there will be 2 that I'm going to try to answer as completely and wholly and thoroughly as possible. One comes from Phyllis Spiritual, and one comes from Matija Markovich. I'm going to read them both in an attempt to sort of outline the gist of things as we're going forward. From Phyllis Spiritual. Any suggestions on where to start with literature for someone who wants to become an avid reader and someday a writer? I know you must be a great reader to become a good writer, so any tips? Novels, poetry, short stories, and plays. I need it all. And then from Matija Markovich, which I'm probably slaughtering, and I apologize for that. I am critically Midwestern. Which poets would you recommend for a beginner to read? And which poets would you consider more challenging but highly rewarding once you put in the effort and work to understand? And somewhere in there, oh no, am I missing something? Someone had asked, how much do you read? How often do you read? Something like that. I've already put it in the thumbnail, so someone somewhere asked that if I fail to find... it was Philo Spiritual. How can I become an avid reader, and how much do you read in a day? So I'm going to start with the how much do you read in a day part. It changes. It varies. I think that it has to, in order for you to really stay on the ball. I think that it's going to change. So right now, I have a video on this channel called Yearly Goals. I think it was the yearly goals. Maybe it was not the yearly goals. Maybe it was the January goals, in which I outline what I call my daily battery. And what I do is, right now I'm writing 300 words a day. I'm reading 45 minutes a day. I am doing 30 minutes of computer work per day, which is typing or editing or creating thumbnails or playing with tags on the videos, things like that. All of these things, I do a daily battery of things and try to get through things that way. But it does vary from time to time. If I am in a crunch for a project on Stripped Cover Lit and I have to get some reading done in order to pump out a video, I do that. So I think that it's going to change based on things when I was in college, depending on the class set, or whether I was in grad school. In grad school, I read a whole lot. But as an undergrad, it just depended. I think that the only helpful answer I can really give on this topic is that you have to set a goal for yourself and meet it. And it has to be a quote-unquote smart goal. It has to be measurable, attainable. What is the specific, measurable, attainable? I don't remember what the R and the T stand for, but it's on that either January or yearly goals video as well. Or you can just Google SMART goals. But you have to truck through. As far as the other parts of these questions, the number one thing that I can advise on both of these fronts, whether you're trying to read more, I apologize. Real quick, the second part of Matija's question about which poet is highly rewarding once you put in the effort because their poetry is difficult, the number one answer to that for me is Shakespeare. I mean, Shakespeare's sonnets are so deep and can be taken so many ways, and so much can be done with them, that there's just so much there that any effort you put into those poems will not be wasted. But as I often say in regards to this type of question, An ass can look at Shakespeare and say how deep it is. An absolute buffoon can look at Shakespeare and say, hey, that looks like literature. The real testament to wit, to intelligence, to love of literature, to being able, willing, and wanting to look into literature and find more there than is on the surface is to be able to do that type of thing with any bit of writing. So if you could go to any poet and put in the work, you can make that poem worth it. You can squeeze, it doesn't matter what the writer put in there, it's what you can squeeze out of it. So my main piece of advice for that would be to find the poet that you want to do the work on. If you can find the poet on which you are willing to do the work, any bit of work you put into that poem will be worth it. But the number one rule that I would be able to say for this type of thing, how do I get better at reading? How do I read poetry better? How do I become a more avid reader? How do I increase my wherewithal with it? Do not DNF. Do not DNF. I know we're in this sort of hippy dippy hipster dipster sort of world online where the whole bookish community, man, yeah, don't shame people for DNF, man, yeah, we just gotta go with where we gotta go. It's the flow we gotta get into. Shut the hell up. You need to finish things. You need to finish everything. There's going to be a lot of stuff you realize you don't like, and you're going to realize you don't like it 20 pages in. But guess what? On page 320 will be the most striking quote of your life. One that almost got me in this fashion was A Farewell to Arms. There is a very long portion of A Farewell to Arms that really is sort of boring and kind of sucks. The novel starts off with a bang, and it starts off with a lot of great quotes. But during the middle there's some really dry times. But if you get to the end, and you know what I'm talking about if you got there, if you get to the end, goddamn, everything in the middle was worth it. On top of that, I think a lot of the struggles that a new or improving or growing reader has if it's a growing reader in a genre or a type of writing that you're not necessarily comfortable with, is you don't know what you like and you're uncomfortable. When you don't know what you like and you're uncomfortable, it feels a lot like this writing sucks. So finish it. That is not to say that you have to retard and paralyze all of your other reading instead of that. But there have been books that have sucked so, and don't get me wrong, I'm not preaching. I've DNF'd tons of stuff, but I've also read tons of stuff. But there have been books in my day that I said, I'm going to finish this. And because of it, what I do is I'm not going to stop reading everything just because that project is killing me. But I will make sure to read 4 pages a day on it. If I'm reading, for example, 40 minutes a day, and I have to dedicate 10 minutes of these minutes to that goddamn book in order to read those goddamn 4 pages, I'm going to do it. And that's how you meter your way through that. Don't DNF things, especially if you're trying to grow and learn. Don't DNF things, especially if you're trying to understand better what it is that you do and do not like. Number 2, for poetry. I'm going to get into poetry here. Which poets would you recommend for a beginner to read? I think that is an impossible question to answer. The only answer I can give on poetry: find someone you like. And it's hard because there's no bookstores anymore. I can tell you how I fell in love with Emily Dickinson, but it's not really going to do you any good because there's no bookstores to go to and get lost. Go to a library and just pick some books off a shelf and read a poem here, read a poem there. Once you find a voice you like, Read the entire book. Read the entire collection of that person's poetry. Now, I recommend going to a library because you're going to have individuals' books. The two that I'm going to show you, Charles Bukowski, Emily Dickinson. I know this is a mirror image, so it's hard to read, but it's Emily Dickinson and it's Charles Bukowski. These two people covered everything. These two people wrote about everything that there is to write about. If you've ever lived it, it's in here someplace. Now, the challenge there is obviously to figure out what that means. What does it mean that it's in there? Emily Dickinson. Open up. Her spirit rose to such a height, her countenance it did inflate, like one that fed on awe, more prudent to assault than dawn, than merit the ethereal scorn that effervesced from her. So what does that mean? What are we doing here? Put in the work, maybe, if it's worth it to you. If you like anything in there, I like it until we get to that effervesced word. What does that even mean? Look it up. What does it mean? You transcribe the poem into whatever English it is, whatever language it is that is best to you to understand. After you do that, after you break a poem down, on Strip Cover Lit, I did whenever I did a William Shakespeare, I did a Billy Wigglestick translation. Basically, it's to say, what does this actually mean? Once you discover what any of these poems mean, you know a girl like that, whose spirit rose to such a height, her countenance it did inflate. You know someone like that. You know someone who got too big for the britches. Basically, that's what that's saying. So anything that you've experienced is in one of these books. Emily Dickinson or Charles Bukowski. You will gravitate towards one more than the other. After that point, you just sort of find poets that remind you of more of Emily Dickinson than Charles Bukowski, or more of Charles Bukowski than Emily Dickinson. If you really like Emily Dickinson and you really hate Charles Bukowski, for example, Byron or Keats or Shakespeare are going to be closer to Emily Dickinson than Bukowski. If you really liked Bukowski but you couldn't stand Emily Dickinson, Sylvia Plath is going to be closer to Bukowski than Dickinson. Ginsberg, Whitman, well, no, maybe not Whitman. Ginsberg, closer to Bukowski than Dickinson. And you will sort of be able to feel your way, if we're channeling Whitman, along those filaments and walk back and forth between the poets. You'll be able to do that. The next thing I would say on poetry is to find an anthology. I think Harold Bloom is always very useful because what Harold Bloom does is Harold Bloom is going to build the poets up a little bit before he gives you examples of them. He builds them up with little bits of biography. But I think that it is very helpful to have an anthology and just leaf through it. Leaf through it. Force yourself to read one poem per day. And we're in this world where so much is searchable. So say you flip open William Morris, near Avalon. A ship with shields before the sun, 6 maidens round the mast, a red gold crown on every one, a green gown on the last. The fluttering green banners there are wrought with ladies' heads most fair, and the portraiture of Guinevere, the middle of each sail doth bear. I read that poem and I kind of like it. I get to Google it. I get to YouTube it. I get to see what there is about that. That is so helpful in today's world. It wasn't there when I was 18. It wasn't there when I was in community college. So find something you like and really wriggle your fingers in behind it. Once you're in there, once you've got purchase, keep on that track. Keep with that fruit. And just savor every bit of it. And through your savoring, you will find the things in there that you do like. If it is Emily Dickinson, I died for beauty, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb. One who died for truth was lain in an adjoining room. I like that usage of big ideas to mean personal things. I died for truth, but was scarce adjusted in the tomb. I like that sort of poetry. Where might I find that sort of poetry? I hope this is doing someone some good. I hope I'm not just rambling. With short stories, I've found personally that it's all about voice. Once I am able to find my way into a writer's voice and enjoy the speaker in that voice, I can read everything that writer writes. So I suggest picking up an anthology. For me, one that I really, really, really recommend. The Scribner Anthology of Contemporary Short Fiction, 2nd edition. Revised and updated 2nd edition. The Scribner Anthology of Contemporary Short Fiction. There are a myriad of writers in here, and each one has a distinctive voice. What you do at that point is you sit down and you read these stories one by one. On Monday, I'm reading the first story. On Tuesday, I'm reading the second story. When you do that, you take little notes about what it is you like. You force yourself to do that. Force yourself to highlight. Force yourself to make notes in the margins. At first, these notes might be things that you simply enjoy. I really liked this phrase. I really liked this line. But that will grow with time. It will become, I'm using orange highlighters in this short story for things that I think follow the theme of being expendable. I am using yellow highlighters in this short story for phrases I really like. I'm using purple highlighters to go with things in this short story that really sort of illuminate queer theory. There's going to be all sorts of things in a short story that you can find, and you'll be able to go through with different highlighters and by marking up the margins to find them. Spend time with the texts. Once you make your way through an entire anthology, something like this, I think there's like 50 stories in here. Don't go with one of the ones that's Longman's Anthology of English Literature, something like. Don't go with one of those. Go with something like this. Go with 50 Great American Short Stories. Go with 50 Classic Short Stories, things like that. And they will start to make more sense to you as you go, and you will find writers you like. Once you find writers you like, you'll be able to find more writing from those writers. Once you find more writing from those writers, you'll be able to find more writers like that. And it's really that simple. It really is that simple to start with things. Novels. As far as novels are concerned, I'm going to give you advice that's going to make me sound very stupid, and it's going to make you sound very stupid if you follow it. But it doesn't mean you're stupid. If you want to read novels, you want to get more into reading novels, you want to be better at reading novels, read short novels. Simple as that. Sounds stupid. I don't have to read little novels all the time. I'm not a little brain. Here's the thing. I'm going to give you 5 examples. Kurt Vonnegut, Slaughterhouse-5. I recommend it. The Stranger, Albert Camus. I recommend it. Ernest Hemingway, The Old Man and the Sea. I recommend it. Shirley Jackson, The Haunting. I recommend it. Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk. I recommend it. These are all disparate voices. These are all disparate themes. These are all very quick reads. Why is that important? I'll tell you why that is important. One of the most rewarding things about reading a novel, what is a book? A book, whether it's a novel, whether it is a collection of short stories, whether it's a fucking dictionary, whether it's a book about alcoholism, whether it's a book about nature via nurture, any of these books, all they represent are the most thorough thought process on a single topic that one person could think to present. What is a dictionary? These are all the fucking words I know. What is Fight Club by Chuck Palahniuk? This is the entire story of Tyler Durden as it matters and pertains to the thread in this novel. What is this collection of short stories? This is 50 North American short stories from 1970. But it's not just 50. That would be silly. These were all chosen for a reason. That's all the book represents. The most thorough thought process on one subject that one person could come up with at one time. So, when you read all of these lovely novels, what's going to happen? Something's going to stick with you in Fight Club. Maybe it is a quote. I've got to highlight something in here. Something has to be highlighted. How Tyler saw it was that getting God's attention for being bad was better than getting no attention at all. Maybe because God's hate is better than his indifference. That really sticks with me. And you know, when I'm reading The Old Man and the Sea, it sure feels like that son of a bitch is forgotten. Boy, wouldn't it be better to be scorned by God than forgotten at sea by God? And hey, since we're talking about that, what about being forgotten by time? Forgotten by time in general. Maybe being unstuck in time. Isn't there a quandary there? Isn't there something nihilistic there? Something nihilistic about being unstuck in time? And if we're talking about nihilism, The Stranger's a pretty good place to die. To die. Why? Because my mom died today. That's the beginning of The Stranger. My mom died today. Or yesterday maybe, I don't know. I got a telegram from the home. Mother, deceased, funeral, tomorrow, faithfully, yours. That doesn't mean anything. Maybe it was yesterday. Reminds me a lot of a quote from this book, which is The Haunting by Shirley Jackson. There is a quote in here about drink your cup of stars and don't ever let them take it away from you. I can't remember where it's at, but basically it is from a character whose mother crushed her life. So when she sees this child who's just crying over this cup that has stars on it, she says, no, don't give in, child. Take your cup of stars. So what's going to happen is all these themes are going to be running through your head, and they're going to follow you from one book to the next. And it's really going to help you understand and develop what theme means, what character means, when you're able to work with a fuller palette. So when you've got 5 books, and you've read all of them in relatively close succession, close enough that you can remember things about them. When you've got those all in there, it's really going to develop your ability to dig into a text, which is going to make texts more rewarding. As texts become more rewarding, you're going to be able to focus on them more. Once you're able to focus on them more and more thoroughly, the reading process is just going to expedite. It becomes quicker, it becomes easier, it becomes more rewarding. It just feeds into itself. Hopefully this is doing something for someone, I don't know. I'm going to try and do this quickly. I'll tell you the story of how I had to get back into reading. When I graduated high school, I jumped into the workforce with such a vigor that I was abandoning all of my literary dreams and aspirations and hopes, and I didn't even realize it. They were just dying. I was still going to college, but I did not have or afford myself the time to read. The way I had to get back into reading was with things I was interested in. At the time, I kind of fancied myself a bit of an actor. At the time, I really liked Gene Wilder. So I picked up Kiss Me Like a Stranger by Gene Wilder. Probably not something I would give the time of day today. But that got me into reading true stories about people. So I wanted to read about Jesse James, a local legend, Jesse James. And it was interesting to me. So I kept reading. And I read, that was The Assassination of Jesse James by that coward Robert Ford. And then I read Lincoln's Melancholy because Jesse James. So I've always been interested in depression and things like that. I mean, obviously, if you watch me long enough, you know I suffer with that type of thing. But it's interesting to me as well as suffering from it. So when I read about all of the paranoia and depression that had overtaken Jesse James during times in his life, I would just peruse about the biography aisle, and the title Lincoln's Melancholy really stood out to me. So I picked it up. And that's how I got back into reading, was one book at a time, something I was interested in, that led to something else I was interested in, that led to something else that I was interested in. And eventually at the time, I don't think I could have sat down and read a fiction book. I really don't. I was pathetic. At that point. It's so disheartening to think back on. I don't think I could have gotten through one. But through building myself up, it made sense, one thing after another. So hopefully I have done something as far as trying to answer some part of at least one of those questions. And if you have any questions for a future episode of Ask Adrian Anything, leave it in the comment section below. And you know, I don't have to talk about books. I don't have to. I can talk about other stuff. I know most of you know me from Strip Cover Lit. I know. But I do other stuff. I'm good for more things, I'm hip. I'm happening. I'm out there. I'm rad. Radical. Ratified. Like a bill. I'm cool. You can ask me about all. I'm an uncle now. I'm an uncle. I have to be. I am legally licensed to talk endlessly about bullshit and claim authority. Okay, so you can ask about anything.